Okay, guys, so things are going to now to start opening up. The chess pieces are beginning to move, and David, D4vd, has a high-profile lawyer, and her name is, I have it right here. Let me just get her picture. I have Blair Berk. There she is. So, what does that mean? So let's look up Blair Berk, see what she's about. Let's first do that. So, Blair Berk is a high-profile Los Angeles criminal defense attorney, often sought by celebrities facing legal troubles. She's a Harvard Law School graduate, JD 1990, with dual BAs and MA degrees from Boston University, and that comes from attorney. Well, it comes from a website, marks her. Berk has over 3 decades of courtroom experience. She first made her name in the 1990s and 2000s defending Hollywood A-listers. So these are some of her notable clients that I saw. Actors and musicians such as Mel Gibson, Lindsay Lohan, Britney Spears, Sylvester Stallone, and Kanye West, among many others. And one early high-profile case, Berk successfully defended rock star Ozzy Osbourne against the lawsuit alleging his song caused a teen suicide. She invoked First Amendment grounds and got the case dismissed. She also handled numerous DUIs and assault cases for stars. She defended Queen Latifah on a reckless driving charge and Reese Witherspoon in a paparazzi altercation. Berk is known for her discretion and tenacity. Fellow lawyers regard her as one of the best in Los Angeles criminal defense. And colleagues note that when superstars in Hollywood get in trouble, they go to Blair Berk. So she's popular, high profile. So they're paying money for her. Her name is always on the short list for celebrity legal crises. Now, while much of her practice has involved navigating celebrities through DUIs, public scrapes, and minor legal entanglements, she has handled serious cases as well. For example, in recent years, Berk took on a murder defense in the Monica Cementilli case, a woman accused of killing her husband. Overall, Berk's reputation is that of a powerhouse defense lawyer who combines legal savvy with media strategy. Hollywood's elite trust her to manage high-profile cases with finesse and to fiercely protect clients' rights. So, guys, there are some updates in the D4vd case, David. So, got the lawyer. So let's get this in play. That's a chess piece. And they pretty much, from what I'm hearing, at least TMZ saying this, they solidified a connection with David and Celeste. It comes from one of their sources, so someone that knew David well, and he did, or whoever that source is, also expressed that the connection was a relationship. So now that could be what may have pushed him for the lawyer. But let me read what I have here. So, possible connection between David and Celeste Rivas Hernandez. So, officially, investigators at first have not confirmed any prior relationship between singer David Anthony Berk, and 15-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Let me get their pictures out here so you guys see who they are. An LAPD spokesman declined to prematurely characterize their relationship. We saw that. That was in the statement from LAPD. And as of mid-September 2025, authorities had not disclosed further information about any connection. However, multiple pieces of evidence reported in the media strongly suggest the two knew each other. So we talked about this, right? So we got social media interaction. So that's a newly surfaced video from January of 2024 live stream shows David and Celeste together on a live stream. So I do believe that's Celeste chatting and answering fan questions. In the clip, Celeste can be heard prompting David to respond to viewer comments. This indicates they interacted casually on camera, implying a familiarity or friendship. Then you got the teacher's testimony. A former teacher of Celeste in Lake Elsinore, we talked about him, California, has come forward with a startling account. He told his class and later confirmed to reporters that Celeste confided she had met David via social media in early 2024. So according to the teacher, the then 13-year-old Celeste ran away from home to Hollywood with David, but police located her and brought her back home a month later. That's a funny little gap there, too, because that's where they believe that the manager, Josh Marshall, also may have known, because they believe there was an email that was sent to him, which he claims he never saw. But the next day, Celeste was brought home. The teacher claims Celeste went missing again in May of 2024. I think the timeline we have is April, but some people are saying May, which was the last he heard of her. He shared this as a cautionary tale about the dangers of meeting strangers online. While this is an unverified anecdote, it aligns with other clues that David was in contact with Celeste during the time she repeatedly ran away from home. And again, I think that's what they're trying to verify. Where was she running to? So family statements, you got Celeste's mother has also provided a key detail. When contacted by TMZ before the body was identified, her mother said Celeste had a boyfriend named David, noting she had never met him. The mother further noted that her daughter had a distinctive SHHH tattoo on her right index finger, and intriguingly, David has an identical SHHH finger tattoo as well. This matching tattoo was later confirmed by the coroner and media reports, fueling speculation of a bond between the two teens. Celeste's family, however, have not detailed any direct knowledge of David in public statements. They focused right now on mourning their loss and pleaded and trying to get answers. Now you got witness and video evidence. So beyond the live stream, photo and video evidence places David near Celeste's hometown. So again, a lot of this comes from TMZ too, but TMZ obtained photo of David in a parking lot in Lake Elsinore, Celeste's home area, just a short walk from her family house. They said it was about like a 6-minute walk. They also report that David and Celeste appeared together in at least one video, which you mentioned, streamed online. These suggest in-person contact. Additionally, LAPD detectives executed a search warrant on September 17, 2025 in an LA residence where David had been staying, again, seeking evidence. They reportedly scoured the home for traces of blood and seized electronics. The very fact that investigators obtained a warrant, which requires probable cause of a crime, indicates they believe there was a connection worth probing. And notably, police had to convince a judge there was reason to suspect a crime to get that warrant. So again, this goes beyond the body being found in a car that was registered to him. Now it's showcasing, did these two have a connection? So in summary, while no official confirmation of the relationship has been made, evidence from social media and witness strongly indicate that David and Celeste Rivas knew each other and had contact. They apparently interacted online and possibly in person, starting when Celeste was probably around 11 or 12. Let's see. Celeste's own teacher and mother have alluded to her running off with someone named David and to matching tattoos linking her with the singer. And again, I think the matching tattoo is also supportive of, the other things that they're finding, like the social media contact. If that's them on the live stream, people saying, her friends at school, the teacher, the parents that she went with the David. So the tattoo alone, as I said, may not mean much, but you got just so much around it where the tattoo in context makes relevance. Let's see. Matching tattoo linking her with the singer. Investigators are looking into everything regarding how they were acquainted. For now, however, authorities have only acknowledged the eerie tattoo coincidence and the fact that Celeste's body was found in David's car. Beyond that, the precise nature of their connection remains publicly unconfirmed. So again, they're looking for the connection and then the relationship. And I think right now, they've established a connection. As I said, I saw something, maybe it came from Brian Etten, but he talked about how TMZ had mentioned that they did talk to someone who knew David, may have worked in the camp, whatever, with David. I don't know the exact relationship to David, but knew him well. And then basically he did know who Celeste was. And he did say they looked like he confirmed they were in a relationship, but then he backs himself, or whoever the source is, backs himself out and says, but I didn't know how old they were. I didn't know the age. So, you maybe expect that. So legal situation and potential charges facing David. So what are we looking at? So thus far, David Berk has not been arrested or formally charged in connection with Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death. The investigation's ongoing and much depends on what evidence emerges about how the teen died. So remember, we don't have that yet. We do not have how she died. The death certificate did tell us something, though, right? I told her she wasn't pregnant. That's great. And was never pregnant. But right now, we still don't know her cause of death. However, based on the publicly known facts, several possible criminal charges could be considered under California law. So you got the concealment of death or improper disposal of human remains. So at minimum, police have stated that someone placed Celeste's body in the front trunk of David's Tesla. hiding her corpse in a bag. If David participated in concealing the death, even if he didn't cause it, he could face charges for actively concealing a death, which is illegal in California. In fact, an LAPD captain noted that since the coroner has not determined how she died, we don't know for sure if anyone has any criminal culpability beyond the concealment of her dead body. Concealing an accidental and natural death is a misdemeanor offense, so that's California Penal Code, punishable by up to 1 year in jail. Similarly, improper disposal of human remains, so dumping a body outside a cemetery, violates state health safety codes. If evidence shows David or associates hid Celeste's body to avoid reporting her death, a misdemeanor charge for concealment or unlawful disposal is quite realistic. Indeed, a private investigator observing the case speculated that prosecutors might ultimately frame the incident this way, for example, as an overdose or accidental death followed by a panic cover-up. We mentioned this in a few videos back, the panic, the sloppiness, and the concealment. So that doesn't shock me. Let's see. Somebody made a bad decision. She ended up in that Tesla. Because remember, guys, even if she overdosed, they're going to get help for her. She's a minor. It's going to expose them to having a minor near them, reckless at the least, but sexual relationships. So a lot of them had reason to cover up, not just David, but anybody that David, gave them a lifestyle. So anybody could have motive here. Such a scenario would likely lead to charges of concealing the death rather than homicide. Now, hasn't been determined it was a homicide, but it could go that route, right? Depending on what the report comes back and says. The coroner's office, so murder or manslaughter. So investigators initially said they were investigating this incident as a homicide, though the LAPD later walked back that statement pending autopsy results. If evidence emerges that Celeste was killed by an intentional act or foul play, David could face homicide charges. First or second degree murder would be on the table if prosecutors believe he willfully or maliciously caused her death. Alternatively, if her death was not premeditated but resulted from a reckless or negligent act by David, a manslaughter charge could be considered. At this time, however, the cause and manner of death are officially deferred. That's undetermined, pending further investigation. Notably, media reports indicate the circumstances were grim. Celeste's dismembered remains were found wrapped in a bag in the Tesla, suggesting an attempt to conceal identity or evidence. Such gruesome detail heightened suspicion of foul play. If forensic evidence, DNA, fingerprints, blood traces, links David to the act of killing or dismembering her, if she was dismembered, that's another debate, murder charges would be likely. On the other hand, without clear evidence of the violent act by him, filing homicide charges would be difficult. The LAPD has conceded it currently lacks proof of a murder and has not named any suspects. So in short, murder or manslaughter charges are possible, but would require solid evidence tying him to causing her death. Now, grooming. Sex crimes involving a minor. A major facet of this case is Celeste's age, 15 and as young as 13, some believe 12 or 11, during some interactions versus David's age, which is 20. If investigators find proof of a sexual relationship or contact between David and Celeste while she was under the age of consent, he could face serious felony charges, irrespective of the cause of death. In California, sex with a minor under 18 can trigger statutory rape charges with enhanced penalties if the age difference is large. And sexual activity with a child under 14 is typically charged as child molestation or lewd acts with the minor. According to a legal expert, since Celeste was only 13 when she first went missing in April of 2024, and David was 18 at the time, if there's any sexual activity, that could be rape of a minor, that could be kidnapping, that could be trafficking charges. They're going to throw all that. They're going to may toss all that at him if that's the case. In other words, any evidence that David engaged in sexual relations with Celeste, especially when she was 13, 14, could lead to charges like statutory rape, child sexual abuse, or even child trafficking if he enticed or transported her for such purposes. These crimes carry significant prison terms. For instance, intercourse with a person under 14 by an adult can carry up to 8 years or more, and human trafficking of a minor even higher. It's important to note that no such charges have been filed at this stage. That would depend, or those charges would depend on finding communication, photos, witness testimony, or other evidence of an inappropriate relationship. I'm sure when they did that digital forensics, I'm sure there's got to be some type of private messaging there. But given the allegations that Celeste ran away with him as a young teen, investigators will certainly be probing this angle. And if substantiated, sex crime charges could be brought in addition to or instead of any charges related to her death. Got kidnapping or contributing to the delinquency of a minor. If it's established that David harbored Celeste or encouraged her to run away from home, he could face charges related to abduction. Encouraged. There's the grooming part. We just talked about that in the last show. Kidnapping typically involves force or coercion, but even willingly transporting a minor without parental consent can lead to criminal liability. There's also a lesser offense of child stealing or abduction without custodial right. That's often applied if someone intentionally lures a minor away from their legal guardians. The teacher's account that David came and got her to LA when she was 13, if accurate, raises the specter of such charges. Additionally, contributing to the delinquency of a minor is a misdemeanor that could apply if he aided her in running away or staying hidden from her parents. I mean, guys, if they're going to throw the book, they're going to do everything. I mean, not to minimize this, but sometimes when you have an inmate and they break a lot of rules, you write them up for every little thing, and then because that they could challenge it. So you're kind of just seeing what sticks. Now, granted, all the thing you're charging them for is applicable, but you never know what they're going to beat and whatnot. So you just throw everything you can at them. Hopefully something sticks and hold some level of accountability. So again, where are we at? While these are somewhat speculative, they are realistic charges if evidence shows the activity that he actively facilitated her being away from home. Notably, one report mentioned classmates believed David was being blackmailed after her second disappearance in May of 2024, implying others were aware of some improper situation. This could be something investigators are examining in the context of potential coercion or kidnapping. So in summary, the legal jeopardy for David spans a spectrum from a minor misdemeanor to life-altering felonies, depending on what the investigation uncovers. On the low end, if Celeste's death is determined to be accidental, say an overdose, and David only wrongdoing was hiding the body, he might face a misdemeanor charge for concealment of a death. On the high end, if evidence points to homicide or sexual exploitation, charges like murder, statutory rape, or kidnapping could be filed under California law. At this point, police officials have emphasized that no charge is confirmed. They are waiting on forensic results and evidence before deciding how to proceed. The case is being handled by the LAPD Robbery Homicide Division, indicating they are treating it with the seriousness of a potential homicide. We can expect that any criminal charges will align with whatever facts are ultimately proven about how Celeste died and what role, if any, David had in both her death and the concealment of her body. Now, I got an update here that I want to give you guys. And this update is, why would David retain counsel now? Mitigating risk and an ongoing probe. So let me just get that part because I wanted to add that, at least try to put something new in there. All right. So in late September, so we're going to redo the timeline real quick, but bear with me. So in late September 2025, immediate scrutiny intensified and investigators continued to comb through evidence. David retained attorney Blair Berk to represent him. This timing is notable. At the point of hire, David had not been charged with any crime, but the circumstances demanded proactive legal protection. There are several likely reasons why his team brought in high-powered counsel at this stage. One, they could be navigating a homicide investigation. So the discovery of Celeste's body in David's car triggered a full-blown police investigation, including search warrants and forensic examination. Even though he wasn't named the suspect publicly, David was effectively at the center of a homicide inquiry, with detectives searching a home he stayed at and seizing his computer and other evidence. So hiring an attorney assures that his rights are protected during this process. Berk can interface with law enforcement on his behalf, advise him on how to cooperate without self-incrimination, and prepare for any possible interrogations or legal moves. Now, this is, again, the game of chess now. In high-stake cases, it's standard and wise for someone in David's position to lawyer up early. As one legal analyst noted, even if the LAPD had not named him a person of interest or suspect, he is undeniably entangled in the case and needs guidance. By retaining counsel now, David mitigates the risk of inadvertently saying or doing something that could be used against him later. So now you also got responding to evolving evidence and an LAPD statement. David's decision came just after a notable shift in the case narrative. On September 27th, the LAPD released a statement hinting that criminal liability may not extend beyond the concealment of a body. In this case, this suggested that investigators considering the possibility that Celeste's death wasn't a murder they could pin on anyone, at least with current evidence, but rather a concealed death scenario. That kind of statement can be a double-edged sword. It hints the authorities might be eyeing lesser charges like concealment instead of homicide. David's team likely recognized this as a critical juncture. By hiring Berk, they can strategize around this development, possibly prepare to fend off even a lesser charge, or be ready to negotiate if prosecutors decide to file a concealment case. Moreover, if the narrative is shifting, as private investigators suggested, toward damage control rather than a full-blown homicide case, David needs an attorney adept at damage control, and she would be perfect for that. Berk's experience dealing with media-sensitive cases is invaluable here. Essentially, the moment signaled that the case might not result in a murder charge, but there were still significant legal implications to manage, and a prime time to get a top lawyer on board. Right now, it's prime time. Preventing legal missteps and protecting rights. So without counsel, David would be at the mercy of a complex investigation and intense public pressure. Any statements he made to police or the press could backfire. For instance, early on, a spokesperson for David announced that he was fully cooperating with the authorities. While cooperation is generally positive, it must be carefully managed. Berk's role is to ensure any cooperation is on safe terms. For example, sitting in on any police interview to advise David when to answer and remain silent, and to negotiate the scope of his cooperation. An attorney will also monitor police and prosecutor action, like searches or subpoenas, to challenge any overreach and make sure David's constitutional rights against unreasonable search, self-incrimination, etc., are not violated. By hiring Berk early, David's team is essentially saying they won't take any chances with legal processes. And then you got mitigating PR, so public damage and public relations, mitigating PR damage and career impact. So this case has unfolded very publicly with sensational headlines linking the young singer of romantic homicide to a dead teen girl. Public sentiment can harden quickly in such scenarios. Already, David faced a viral backlash, and business partners began distancing themselves. For example, fashion brands like Crocs and Hollister dropped him from campaigns within days of the news breaking. Each new leak, such as the teacher story or the tattoo revelation, generated more scrutiny and speculation online. By bringing in Blair Berk, who is well-versed in high-profile crises, David is also addressing the public relations nightmare. Berk can coordinate with crisis managers or issue statements to ensure the defense narrative is represented. Indeed, observers have noted that David's situation now requires careful PR management to salvage his career while the legal process plays out. It's going to be a tough thing to do. One investigator said of repairing his public image, given the viral backlash over the case and even David's own lyrics and merchandise fueling speculation. Hiring counsel is a way to impose discipline and strategy on both legal and public responses. For instance, David has remained completely silent publicly since the body was found, likely on advice of counsel or even maybe Interscope, to avoid any misstatement. This silence, combined with behind-the-scenes legal work, is aimed at mitigating the risk of trial by media. Trial by media. In short, Berk's hire signals that David's team is in damage control mode. They recognize the peril to both his freedom and his reputation, and they want an expert at the helm to steer through the storm. And then you got to prepare for the possible charges or lawsuits. So finally, retaining a lawyer now allows David to be ready if the situation escalates. Should the police decide to file charges, whether for concealment, sexual misconduct, or something else, David already has counsel familiar with the case who can immediately engage. This avoids any scrambling if an arrest comes. Additionally, the family of Celeste Rivas Hernandez, in their grief, could potentially pursue civil action, a wrongful death lawsuit, for example, regardless of the criminal case outcome. Having Berk on the team early means David's side can begin gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, and formulating a defense narrative well in advance. Essentially, it's about being proactive rather than reactive. Given the complexity of the case, involving forensics, digital evidence, social media phone records, and potentially interstate aspect, he is from Texas, she's from California, an attorney can start addressing these facets immediately. All of this reduces the risk of being caught off guard by new developments. So in summary, David Camp hired Blair Berk at this moment to safeguard against both legal and reputational risk. She brings expertise in dealing with the LAPD and LA prosecutors, plus a track record of guiding high-profile clients through intense scrutiny. By having her on retainer now, David is better positioned to handle whatever comes next, whether it's cooperating with investigators or unlimited terms, or pushing back against potential charges, or simply surviving the court of public opinion until the facts are established. Now, guys, I wanted to add a couple more things here, so bear with me. I have one more section I want to read. I wanted to add potential defense strategies for David and his legal team. I like to do that because I like to give us a bit of a head start of where things could be going. So given the murky facts, a body hidden in a car trunk, an unclear cause of death, and swirling media conjecture, David's defense team, led by Blair Berk, will be crafting a strategy that addresses both the legal uncertainties and the public scrutiny. Several key defense approaches are likely based on the nature of the case. So I have emphasized the lack of proven cause of death, creating reasonable doubt. So, of course, there's no find yet. So depending on how that goes, they could emphasize the lack of proven cause of death. So one of the strongest cards for the defense is that so far, no clear cause of manner of Celeste's death has been determined. Without concrete evidence that she was murdered versus dying from, say, an overdose or other cause, it will be hard for any prosecutor to convince a jury that David is guilty of homicide. Berk will likely hammer this point. If the medical examiner cannot even say how the girl died, how can they prove my client killed her? The defense can argue that any number of scenarios could have occurred that do not involve murder by David. This ties into the fundamental strategy of reasonable doubt. If the cause of death is mysterious, the benefit of the doubt should go to the defendant. In court, Berk might underscore that investigators themselves wavered, initially calling it a homicide investigation, then apologizing and backtracking. See, everything you do at the very beginning matters. So if I was Laura, I'd pull that in too. You said it was homicide, but you backtrack, so let's explore that a little bit, and I think that's relevant. Such inconsistencies can be used to cast doubt on the prosecution's theory. Essentially, the defense will likely say, we all want answers for how this young woman died, but suspicion and coincidence are not proof of a crime by David. The autopsy found no clear evidence of murder, and you cannot convict on speculation. So this approach could be very persuasive if the forensic evidence remains inconclusive. Then you got propose an alternate narrative. You guys see this a lot. I think even Kohlberger, before they decided to take the plea, that they were going to start trying an alternate theory, a third-party involvement. I think you also saw it in the Allen case in Delphi. So in tandem with denying murder, the defense might advance a plausible alternate explanation for the tragedy, one that does not implicate David. One such theory already floated by observers is that Celeste may have died accidentally, for example, by drug overdose or other misadventure, and that someone else in a panic hit her body in David's car. Even the private investigator following the case suggested it might have been an OD going awry, and that somebody made a bad decision and she ended up in the Tesla. Berk could adopt a version of that narrative if it aligns with evidence, So perhaps Celeste was at a party or a house, not necessarily with David present, where she died, and a frightened individual used a readily available Tesla to conceal her remains. This theory could be supported by the timeline. Reports say the car was abandoned for weeks while David was away on tour. Indeed, David had an alibi of sorts, being on a U.S. tour in early September 2025 when the body was discovered, and neighbors claimed the Tesla had been parked in that spot for about a month prior. If David was touring and not in Los Angeles at the time, Celeste likely died, and forensic timing suggests she was dead for several weeks. The defense will highlight that. They could argue he wasn't even around when this poor girl died. Additionally, the defense might point the finger at unknown third parties. Celeste was a runaway who could have been with any number of people while missing. For instance, David's lawyer could suggest that someone else, perhaps an acquaintance of Celeste's or even a malicious actor, harmed her and stashed the body in Berk's vehicle without his knowledge. Attorney Dmitry Gorman, not involved in the case, but commenting as a former prosecutor, outlined this exact defense. She had access to his car. He travels for work. Somebody else could have harmed her and put her in the car. She might have died in another way that had nothing to do with him. We can expect Berk to use similar reasoning by presenting an alternate suspect or cause, even hypothetical. The defense introduces doubt. Unless the prosecution can disprove these alternatives, jurors cannot convict. Essentially, the strategy is to acknowledge the tragedy, but sever any casual links to David, painting him as an unfortunate bystander who's now caught in a nightmare he didn't create. And guys, this is great because if you ever see the cases move forward, look at these angles. And most of the time, it's usually the pattern you see in other cases. So then you have contest any evidence of foul play or misconduct. So if prosecutors come forward with specific evidence, say forensic evidence from the car or home or digital evidence of David's communication with Celeste, the defense will, of course, scrutinize and challenge it. For example, investigators seize electronics from the Hollywood Hills home where David stayed. If they find incriminating messages or searches, the defense might question the chain of custody or context of those items. Remember, guys, when your client it looked like the evidence pointing at them, is pretty definitive, they start to attack the due process or the credibility of the witnesses, for example. So any forensics like DNA or blood in the car or house will be analyzed by the defense owns experts. They may argue evidence is contaminated or circumstantial. In a case already lacking clear cause of death, the defense will be aggressive in asserting that nothing definitely tied David to the murderous act. Even the fact that Celeste's remains were dismembered, if that's what it was, while shocking, does not automatically prove who did it. If no fingerprints or DNA linked David to the dismemberment, Berk could argue that aspects is simply evidence of someone's wrongdoing, not necessarily her client's. The defense might also move to suppress certain evidence if it was obtained unlawfully, though at this point all indications are warrants were used properly, including when they found the body. They went for that search warrant. Yeah, that was a very smart move. Another area to contest could be the teacher's statement and other hearsay. The teacher's classroom revelations and even the ex-boyfriend's comments on Celeste's troubled home life has swirled the media. Berk could file motions in limine to exclude such hearsay from trial, arguing it's unreliable and prejudicial. In essence, the defense will aim to whittle the case down to hard evidence and then attack the sufficiency of that evidence. Given the currently scant public evidence, the strategy may be effective. And then you got to address the tattoo and relationship inferences. One of the most headline-grabbing details is the matching tattoo on David and Celeste's fingers. Prosecutors might use this to imply a close relationship or even a pact between them, which I think it is a bit of a pact. That's hard to prove. The defense will need to neutralize this. They might argue this tattoo is a coincidence or a trendy design many young people have. We said that on my shows before. Thus not proof of a personal connection. If evidence shows Celeste was a fan of David, the tattoo could be presented as her imitation of a favorite artist rather than a symbol of a secret relationship. We said this. Essentially, Berk may concede it's odd, but remind jurors that a tattoo does not equal a crime. Similarly, any suggestion that David lyrics, for instance, his songs like Romantic Homicide indicate guilt will be fought vigorously. The defense can bring in expert testimony or use precedent like Berk's own success in the Osborne case to argue that artistic expression or macabre coincidences should not be taken as literal evidence. This is part of managing the public narrative spillover into the courtroom, ensuring jurors focus on facts, not innuendos. Berk's background shows she's adept at separating salacious media narratives from courtroom evidence. She famously defended lyrics and fought paparazzi narratives for clients. We can expect her to do the same thing for David. Having a dark song or a matching tattoo might be unfortunate optics, but it's not proof of murder. And then you got the possible sex crime allegation. If the prosecution or media shift towards allegations of an inappropriate relationship between David and Celeste, which is hinted at by the teacher's story and mother's comments, the defense will have to address that as well. Initially, they may outright deny any sexual or romantic involvement. If no direct evidence, photos, messages of a sexual relationship is found, Berk can underscore that rumors are not facts, pointing out that it is not clear that a relationship was romantic and nothing has been proven on that front. However, if some evidence does emerge, for example, hypothetically, if messages suggest intimacy, the defense approach might shift to mitigation. They could argue David believed she was older or that no force or coercion occurred, trying to stave off the most serious charges, but this veers into speculation. At present, no charges of this kind have been filed, and David's team is likely to avoid this topic unless forced, since any hint of sexual misconduct with a minor would severely prejudice a jury against him. The better strategy for now is to keep the focus on the lack of evidence tying him to the death and treat the rest as irrelevant side allegations. In fact, defense attorney Dmitry Gorin noted that while the court of public opinion is assuming the worst about David, proving it in court will be far more difficult, and that nothing reported so far definitively pins the death on him. Berk will likely echo that sentiment, that public outrage or moral judgment, for example, over an alleged age-inappropriate friendship, must be separated from the legal question of criminal guilt. And then you have cooperation and transparency to a point. Again, I was at the beginning. Interestingly, one defensive tactic is what David Camp had already signaled, cooperating with authorities to show he has nothing to hide. Since early on, his representatives claimed he was fully cooperating while on tour. In practice, this might mean voluntarily providing an alibi, turning over certain records, or agreeing to interviews and with counsel present. By being cooperative but careful, the defense builds an image of innocence. If he were guilty, would he be helping the police? they'll want to maintain that stance until it conflicts with self-preservation. Notably, despite that stated cooperation, David has not spoken publicly or given unsupervised statements, a balance likely orchestrated by Berk. We may see the defense continue to offer assistance to investigators, for example, sharing tour schedules, witnesses who saw him far from LA, etc., to reinforce that David is not a fugitive or obstructing. He's an open book because he did nothing wrong. Of course, this strategy has limits. If the investigation started focusing squarely on him, the tone could shift to a more adversarial defense. But until then, demonstrating transparency is part of winning goodwill and looking innocent. Hey, he cooperated, and eventually when they start pinning it on him or start to get closer to him, then you start to see the heated exchanges. And then you got the managing the public perception. So that's outside the courtroom. Lastly, although not a legal strategy per se, public relations strategies is integral. You know what I mean? In a case under such public glare, Berk and David team will be keen to prevent the narrative from running away in the press. This means likely connecting false rumors when necessary and highlighting facts that favor David. For instance, after initial sensational reporting, subsequent news stories noted that police apologized for labeling it a homicide. As we mentioned before, that there was a homicide investigation prematurely, a point the defense would amplify to temper public assumption of murder. They also might point out through media or court filings that David has not been charged and has no prior criminal issues to counteract the stigma. If the case does not result in serious charges, salvaging David's reputation will be crucial for his career, and that will involve carefully timed public statements or press handling. Berk's prior clients show she's experienced in this. She has often worked in tandem with crisis managers to get favorable narratives out. For example, having clients testify against paparazzi to flip the script. In David's situation, the defense might welcome opportunities to quietly emphasize his clean record or the idea that he too wants answers for what happened to Celeste. In evaluating these strategies, it's clear the defense overarching goal is to introduce uncertainty about David's involvement while humanizing him in the face of public suspicion. They will likely argue that the only thing tying him to the tragedy is unfortunate coincidence, that his car was used to hide a body by someone else, and that perhaps Celeste was a troubled teen who met a tragic end through circumstances out of David's control. They will remind everyone that our justice system requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And as Gorman noted, while people might gossip about David's guilt, the evidence to convict him may not be there. If the prosecution case remains as hazy as it is now, the defense's multi-pronged approach, deny, deflect, and demand proof, could resonate strongly. Ultimately, Blair Berk's team will be aiming either to prevent charges from ever being filed, so by casting enough doubt during the investigation, or if charges are to come, to secure an acquittal or minimal penalties. By leveraging the lack of clear evidence, offering alternative explanations, and carefully managing both the courtroom narrative and the public narrative, the defense will strive to ensure that David Berk, or David Anthony Berk, David, is not unjustly scapegoated for a tragedy that has captured headlines but remains full of unanswered questions. So, guys, that's a lot there. But I wanted to give you some updates with some perspective. So I hope you guys got a lot from this episode. And as always, guys, stay safe.